Hey everybody, I'm Louis Bolden and welcome to Solutionaries, the podcast. On our second episode of Solutionaries, we tackled a big topic and it was affordable housing. And in that episode, we assembled a panel of people to discuss their journey of trying to find and keep affordable housing. And Robin Sackevich was on that panel and she is joining me today. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
So we just wanted to continue that conversation. And for those who didn't see that episode, the second episode of Solutionaries, we want to tell them a little bit about you. So you moved to Florida in 2015.
Correct.
And you moved here from Lansing, Michigan,
Correct.
in order to be closer to family.
Yes.
So you were telling me a while ago that it was easier to find affordable housing in Michigan, much easier than it was to find a place here.
Correct. One thing that kind of you have to think about in Orlando specifically is there's a lot of toll roads here. So you kind of have to work yourself around. I'm going to have to pay an extra $5 every day to get to work if I live farther out. Also, the traffic here is just amazingly bad. Up in Michigan, that really wasn't a big issue because I lived in a fairly small city. There was lots of housing that was close to the center of the city, which is a lot easier to get to than it is here. So when I came down here, I started kind of digging into places that might have been a little farther out. And I was like, maybe if I like move there and then I, jump on the internet and see the commute, and you just have to think that is not going to work for me. So you want to find something closer. So yeah, Michigan was a lot easier for me to find a place that I could afford.
So when you moved here, you ended up moving in with your mom. Was that the original plan, or was that because you couldn't find a place that was affordable?
That was not the original plan. My original plan was to, find a place in on my own and move into it because I had a severance package from my employer that had let me go. And I had the money to move into an apartment, but I just couldn't find anything.
And so you work for a theme park here.
Yes.
There are a ton of people here who work in the hospitality industry. And I remember you saying on that episode that you really love your job.
I love my job. I love working with people. It's probably not the ideal job for somebody that wants to make a little more money, but I'm working my way into better positions. It's just taking time. But there's a lot of people that are here that work for the theme parks, and not only the theme parks, the resorts.
A lot of resorts.
One of them right up the street just built recently, probably in the last 10 years, like a whole bunch of hotels around it. And all those hotels have hundreds, if not thousands of people working for them. Where are they living? Because when you're making, 15, 16, 17, and maybe less an hour, you cannot afford an apartment by yourself unless you're living in an income restricted apartment, which is where I live. I live in an apartment that only allows you to make below a certain income to live there. So it's perfect for people that work at the theme parks that make, kind of subpar salaries, but there are only a handful of these complexes in the area, and most of them have incredibly long wait lists to get in. So you gotta find something else before that.
So your intention was to get your own place.
Correct.
But because you couldn't find anything for so long, you ended up moving in with your mom.
Correct.
That lasted longer than you expected it to
Yes.
last. You ended up living with your mom about 3 years?
3 years, yeah.
Okay, and that's because you ended up on one of those wait lists.
Correct. So I was on a wait list for an income restricted apartment for a year and a half.
For a year and a half.
Because I wanted a 1-bedroom apartment, and they only had a handful of those. I actually they had actually called me after a year, and I was all excited. I was going to move, and then they called me back. They're like, "Oh, the guy decided not to move, so you're going to have to wait longer." So I waited longer.
Mm-hmm. And that's where you're living now.
That is where I'm living now.
So correct. Were you only on the wait list for the one place?
I was, yes.
Okay.
The reason for that was there was a couple other options. One was in a very busy area that has a ton of traffic, and I really didn't want to live in that. And the other one was out in Kissimmee, which wasn't too far from where my sister lived. In fact, it was almost across the street, but it was a good commute to work. Plus, I would have had to pay tolls every day, and even $3 a day adds up when you're having to go to work every day with paying $3 just to get to work.
Right.
So
right.
I decided against those two, and I'm not sure if I would have been able to move any quicker in either one of those. But I talked about it with my mother, and we both decided that this one would be the one that I would wait for.
So you had a total of 3 options?
Mm-hmm.
That's it? Out of all of the
yes.
apartment complexes in Central Florida, you found 3 that worked for you, that you could afford?
Correct. Well, 3 that were within like a certain amount in the right neighborhoods that I could afford. I did look at least 10 apartment complexes during my, kind of, looking around. I did find one, but it was in a horrible neighborhood, and I would have felt very out of place there as a, girl from Vermont originally. I'm like, I don't know if I would really, do well here. So I decided against that one. But the 3 were the ones within the area I wanted to be, and that was it. There was in those areas, even if you count just one of those areas, let's say the one in Kissimmee, there was at least 20 apartment complexes just in that general vicinity. And there was only one that was income restricted and I could afford. So I do not know where the rest of my cast member friends are living. A lot of them are younger, in their 20s, and they have roommates. I have one friend that's got 4 roommates. I'm almost 50 years old. Roommates that are in their 20s, probably not going to work.
Yeah.
I did try to find a roommate. I did find one, and we were ready to talk a little more until I went on Zillow and found out her house is in foreclosure, and I didn't want to be in the middle of that. So I decided against that. But you have to be really careful these days. You have to do your research and look at the crime statistics in the neighborhood and all that. But the lower priced apartments are not always going to be in a bad neighborhood, but I didn't want to risk it. So the 3 that I picked were in the places that I knew. But that was it, 3.
What did you think when we did 2 panels on that second episode of Solutionaries? One was with people who were trying to find and keep affordable housing, and the other panel was made up of people who work in the industry, who were realtors and developers. And what did you think about all of the things that they had to say about why it's so difficult to build and get affordable housing in Florida?
I honestly think it's the government needs to step in and help. It's not about how much money you make at your job. It shouldn't be about that. It should be about being, fair with what you have. I don't need granite countertops. I don't need tile floors. I don't need a huge living room. I don't need furniture included. I just want a clean apartment in a safe area that I can afford. I see signs. I mentioned this on the panel before. It's not luxury. I don't want luxury.
Mm-hmm.
I want safe, and I want clean, and I want affordable. I don't need all the bells and whistles. Just give me something I could afford, and that's lacking. There are hotels in this area that aren't doing real great. Why can't we convert some of those into affordable housing?
Mm-hmm.
I think affordable housing has become kind of a stigma, like, oh, the poor people live there, and the poor people are this and that, and the poor people are those people that are serving you at the theme parks. Mm-hmm. The poor people are the ones that you see walking their dog down the street and with all the hotels, because that's the only place that they can afford right now. Mm-hmm. The kids are in your schools. With your kids, they're friends with your kids. Some of your friends that you work with at your job are probably these people. Mm-hmm. They're not a dragon hiding in the back. They are us, everyone. I have a college education. I went to a Big Ten university. I am not a person that I ever thought would be in this position. Mm-hmm. But I moved down here because my mother's not getting any younger, and I want to be close to her. My father passed away in 2012, and I tell you, once you lose a parent, it changes everything. Mm-hmm. It changes your search for other things. Like, I always wanted to do this and that and this, and now I'm like, I'm going to move to Florida. I'm going to just do this and take care of my mom, or at least help, so now I'm happy. I live very close to my sister, who lives in Kissimmee, and I live very close to my mother, and she's in Point Siena, and she lives in a beautiful retirement community. It's 55 plus. So if I was living with her now and something happened to her, guess what? I'm not 55. Mm-hmm. I would have to leave. Mm-hmm. So, it's hard.
Yeah. And, Robin, one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast and the episode that we did on Solutionaries is because we know that there are a lot of people in this situation. A mm-hmm. lot of people in Central Florida work for the theme parks. A lot of
Correct.
People work in the hospitality industry, at hotels. There are housekeepers. There are cooks. There are all of these people who are struggling to find an affordable place to live. And there is some progress. There are some theme parks that are, building housing for their employees.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay, all right.
To be honest with you, because a lot of stuff gets announced and then it's like womp womp. They announce it and then it gets forgotten about. So.
But think about that. Even if it does happen, it's not going to be able to accommodate everyone. And so again, you'll be looking at a situation with possibly long wait lists and that kind of thing. You mentioned the hotels, that there's a lot of people here do live in hotels, and you were telling me there's a reason for that. What is that?
The reason for that is when I moved into my apartment, I had to put down approximately $3,000. First and last month's rent, deposit, and then pet security deposit. Mm-hmm. So who has $3,000 just sitting around? Not a lot of people. I had it because I had my severance package, so I was able to afford that. But most people don't have that kind of money, mm-hmm. especially if you're renting. Right. Like you could put that down on a home maybe, but if you're renting, that $3,000 is a lot. Mm-hmm. So that's the reason, and a lot of people live in these hotels because they don't ask for those kinds of deposits. You're paying so much a week mm-hmm. for your basically your studio.
Mm-hmm. You're just paying as you go and not having to come up with this lump sum. Yeah. And so a lot of people are resorting to that. You were also telling me that some of your colleagues work all over the place.
Yeah, I've got a friend that lives in Edgewood. I've got a friend that lives in Tampa. I've got several that live in Lakeland that I work with.
And they commute
They
daily.
commute daily. I mean, Lakeland isn't really that far away, as the crow flies. But if you have to drive on I-4 every day through that Davenport, Champions Gate area, Disney area, you're backed up.
And for people who don't live in the Central Florida area, I-4 down by the theme parks is very congested all the time, pretty much any time of the day.
Yeah.
So having to do that every day, it can be tough on people.
And now they're digging it up, so now they're going to be doing construction. So we'll see how that is. But yeah, I have a lot of friends that live pretty far out. Even living in like Winter Haven, which isn't really that far, but it's a commute, and it's a wear and tear on your car. You have accidents on the highway because there's a lot of people that are here that apparently didn't ever learn how to drive. So, and I've noticed that people aren't as friendly here in Florida. So, they're going to run over you before they let you through.
Here in the Sunshine State?
So yes, it's difficult, and if you want to find something affordable, you have to find it farther out. Yeah. But there's costs to that. Literally, there are costs to that.
You mentioned earlier that there is a stigma attached to affordable housing, that people believe that affordable housing is for poor people. Do you think that's why this issue of affordable housing does not get more attention?
Absolutely.
You do?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Because it's viewed as a poor people problem.
It's a whole not in my backyard scenario. I grew up in Vermont. I grew up in Burlington, which is the big city for us. It was 40,000 people, not very big, but it was a city. I grew up very close to the lake, and I lived across the street from a huge affordable housing apartment complex. My friends lived there. To me, it wasn't anything. I mean, it was just our neighbors. I never thought of it as anything bad growing up, because my parents never gave me that opinion that these people were poor and we were not poor. And you think apartments are hard to find in Florida? I looked up Vermont, like Burlington, just to look. There were literally 4 houses for sale in the entire neighborhood that I lived in.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's very tight, but affordable housing there wasn't as much of a stigma as I've seen. Like, to me, I mean, maybe to other people, but to me, it was just my neighbors across the street. But I think there's a lot of people that don't think that way. I think there's a lot of people that think that you're bringing affordable housing in, so you're bringing the bad people in. You're bringing criminals and this and that, which I'm not that.
Right.
My neighbors aren't that.
Right.
I live in a very nice apartment complex that's safe. That I do not feel uncomfortable walking my dog at night. I haven't heard of any issues at all. I mean, they would let us know if something happened, and nothing has happened.
And it's income restricted, and you said you have to prove that you don't make above a certain threshold.
Yes. Yeah, you have to show your pay stubs for, I think it's 4 months or 3 months, and you have to show them those and they actually want to look at your bank account as well. But yeah, it's not that hard to do, but to find a spot in one of these places is difficult, especially if you have a few kids or whatever and you need a bigger place, or even me needing a 1-bedroom apartment. There's only so many 1-bedroom apartments. So I had been looking at roommates, but nothing ever turned from that. But
What would you say to our legislators, our lawmakers? There are a lot of people who believe, for the past 2 years, I have been covering a lot on property insurance because property insurance has gotten very expensive and it's gone up and up. And so I've talked to a lot of consumers who are frankly fed up with the price that they're having to pay for their property insurance. And I've gotten emails from people to say that they believe our legislature is legislating things that don't have to be legislated, like banning textbooks in classrooms and this sort of thing. So this is an issue that affects a lot of people. If lawmakers are watching or listening to this podcast, what would you say?
I think they know what they need to do. They need to help have more affordable housing. We need to have more affordable housing. We need to make things a little more, I don't know if I'd say equal, but I mean, I'm definitely not a socialist. I don't want everybody to be able to, live in the same place. I know I don't make a lot of money. I admit that, but
I also like that you said that you really like your job.
I do love my job. I love my job, but I don't want to have to sacrifice that to make more money to live in a place that I can afford. Like $1,100 a month is like out of my reach. I know people can afford that, but that's like, I actually looked it up last night to kind of prepare for this. And I looked it up, just type in like $11,000 or $1,100 a month at a cap. I think I found 4 apartment complexes for that.
Really?
So most of them are going for 12 and 13.
Now, were you looking in all of Central Florida? Were you looking in a certain area?
I was looking in Orlando area.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I can't afford that. I'm lucky I am where I am. But, again, income restricted. I had to wait a year and a half. I talked to somebody recently, and she said the wait list is like 6 months now. In fact, if you go to my apartment complex's office, there's actually a little sign out front telling you how long that waiting list is now.
And what do you said $1,100 is out of reach for you. Do you mind if I ask what you pay at the complex you live in now? I pay $860 a month, but that includes it's a $20 pet deposit, or pet rent, so it's like $860 or $840 a month. And do you have an increase coming up, or is that with
the
increase?
Unfortunately, I had to sign a paper that said they can raise my rent anytime they want, which is crazy. Why is that even legal?
So if you're at 8 now, you could be creeping up towards that.
Yeah, and I mean, the negotiations with Disney and the union are hopefully going to bring us raises, but just like the last time we got a raise, that will raise the median income for the area, and when the median income for the area is risen, our rent raises. So things end up equaling out in the end. So even if Disney does give us more money, let's say the $17 an hour that they're getting at Universal, we will still, our rent will end up getting higher because the median income in the area is going to raise. You
said earlier that lawmakers know what they need to do.
Oh yeah, they know they need to work a little bit harder on this issue.
Do you think it gets the attention that it deserves?
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay.
I think the theme parks, like everybody wants to make the theme parks happy because they bring in a lot of money to this area. I mean, I know there was a long time that we were trying to get Amazon to come here, like trying to like lure them to this area. So why are we spending money on that, yet we can't spend money trying to figure out how we can fix this? It's a crisis. This housing crisis in this area. Like even, I'm probably gonna have to have surgery this summer, and rent is gonna be difficult when I'm off from work because I only get like $200 a week if I'm out for short-term disability. Mm-hmm. How am I going to pay my rent on $200 a week?
Right.
So now I'm going to have to think about how am I going to do this.
And keep your apartment.
Right. So the last time I was out, I was able to dip into the COVID funds for rent assistance. Right now, there are no funds for rent assistance, especially for a single person without children that isn't behind on her rent right now. Mm-hmm. So what am I going to do?
I remember Nadia from our first panel, and Nadia is a woman who has I believe a son in college, and she said something similar to what you said. She said, people think this is a poor people issue, and she said I make a decent salary, but it's just by the time you pay everything you have to pay, and by the time you pay tuition, and there's just not a lot left.
Right.
So, closing thoughts. What do you want people to know about affordable housing?
Affordable housing does not mean that crime is going to come to your neighborhood. Affordable housing means that it's a hard subject to teach people. I just want people to understand that affordable housing doesn't mean the bad people are coming into your neighborhood. It shouldn't be not in my backyard type of situation. It's not a chemical dumping ground. It is a place that people, in fact, they don't even need to build affordable housing. I think that some of the apartment complexes that we have now could easily be converted to affordable housing if some of these landlords that own, well, it's not even landlords. These are owned by giant corporations. There are very, very few, if any, apartment complexes in this area that are owned by individuals. Mm-hmm. Most of them are owned by huge companies. In fact, and they change hands all the time. Like, I've lived in my complex for 4 years. I think we've had 3 owners since I moved in. So they need to start working with some of the complexes that we have now and maybe subsidize some of these, even 10% of the apartments in a complex. If you're gonna, let's say you're gonna build a new apartment complex, so if we're gonna give you the permission to build, you need to make 20% of all the properties you own income restricted, or something like that. It doesn't have to be a whole apartment complex. It could be part of an existing one, and that's definitely something that needs to be looked at. I don't know how that would work, but even having a lower rent for people that make below amount of money, without having to say, okay, so this part of the apartment complex is this much and this part is this much. No, you don't have to do that. Just do it by individual, case by case. You have to prove, just like I did, how much you make, but that would definitely help give some people a leg up.
Having a sliding scale.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So.
Well, Robin, thank you so much. This is such an important issue. Thank you so much for being willing to talk about it.
Absolutely.
And shed some light on this issue, because it does impact a lot of people. So we really appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to Solutionaries, the podcast. I'm Louis Bolden. Take care.